Welcome to the Recruiter Startup Podcast. My name's Dulta Doherty, and in this podcast series, we will be speaking to investors, advisors, entrepreneurs, founders, and recruiters who are all over the world. And we are going to discuss how to set up, scale, and operate a world-class recruitment business. Yesterday, we were in Sydney speaking to Ksenia Tichenko, which was great. And today I am speaking to David Savage, who is a podcaster and IT recruiter with Harvey Nash. David has been with Harvey Nash for over 10 years, I think. And he's got an amazing podcast called Tech Talks, where he goes out and, interviews leaders of tech businesses in London. And him and his co-host then break it down and make it fun and entertaining. So good guest, quick one today. We just had a bit of a chat about his background, his podcast, but we also discussed what he would do if he was to set up an IT recruitment company. And he made it very clear that he doesn't want to do that. But if he did, this is what he would do. Have a listen and find out. I thought it was spot on and really cool. David Savage, how are you today?
Not too bad. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fantastic. I've done the gym. I've got my black coffee in front of me, and I am ready to rock here.
It's always a nice kind of feeling when you've got the gym out the way in the morning. And I don't know. I don't understand people who go to the gym after work. Generally speaking, it always feels a lot better when it's done, and you can have a coffee and feel like the day's kind of ahead of you.
I agree, but I was always an evening trainer, and yeah, this is suiting me much better. I'm off the beer for a month. I'm doing the intermittent fasting stuff. I'm a bit of a full-on character. I'm all or nothing.
Are you doing 5-2, or is it something different to that?
I have 2 kids under 2, and I've no life, so it's just a full-on time, and I have to be the best me for the next while before I can bring the bad guy back in the winter who likes to have a couple of pints of Guinness and enjoy.
Yeah, I'll be honest. The World Cup for me was a little bit of a disrupting influence in the middle of the summer. It felt like Christmas had arrived in July.
Yeah, it was. It was a great time. Even being Irish and being here, I enjoyed it. So look, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. And I've given everybody a little bit of a rundown into your background, but you have an amazing podcast called Tech Talks. And you're one of the most experienced one company. You're the Ryan Giggs of IT recruitment in London.
It's certainly true that I've been at one place for a long time, but then honestly, in that regard, I'm not particularly unique for this particular environment.
Well, walk us through. How did it all begin for you?
Pure accident. If I'm perfectly honest, I'd not heard of recruitment. I moved to London post-university. I'm from Newcastle. I grew up in Newcastle. I lived there till I was 18. I came down to university in Essex.
That's a very soft accent you have for a Geordie.
It gets a little bit stronger if the football's on, or I've had a drink, or I'm around friends from home. Yeah. But I guess 13 or 14 years or whatever it is now in the southeast has definitely softened my accent. And my mum's from Dagenham and my dad's from the Lake District, so I didn't really have a strong Geordie accent kind of at home. But I came down to the southeast for university, and then being so close to London, a lot of university friends moved to London post studying. And I did the same. I got a flat with a friend and just kind of thought I'll sort work out afterwards. I've got a bit of money kind of for a deposit and to get me through weeks. Let's move to London and I'll apply for jobs. And I'd spent a year within the Students' Union as the Sports and Societies Vice President, running kind of 250 different sports clubs and societies on campus. It was a bit of an ego trip. Yeah, it was a sabbatical position, so it was elected.
Do you know what that is? That's like in university life too much, trying to hang on to it.
Yeah, people often say that, but I'll be perfectly honest, and I can kind of swing back around to I think it was the best. It was the best grounding for recruitment anyone could possibly have. Um, I at that time wanted to move into universities and be the full-time member of staff supporting the student officer, and I applied for a couple of different roles. One at Queen Mary, one at Kingston, and I kind of came up short. I came up second and third in the process to people who I knew on the circuit and had a bit more experience. Um, and there were elements of that role that probably weren't particularly well suited to my character. I'm not good on admin. I'm not particularly structured. Um, the ideas side of things, yes, absolutely, but I'm not sure I would have been particularly successful in that role. And I panicked a bit, and I needed a job, and I saw an advert online that I didn't really understand, and I applied to it, and it turned out to be a rec to rec. I didn't know what a rec to rec was, to be perfectly honest. I went in for an interview assuming I was interviewing for them, and then got when they sent me elsewhere. Um, but it was a situation where I needed a job, and after a couple of interviews, this company was telling me that I could come and work there, and I would start pretty much immediately. And if I did well, there was money to be earned, and I kind of thought, well, let's jump at it. And I didn't know it was sales. I didn't really understand what recruitment was. It wasn't until I turned up on the first day I was like, oh, this is what it is it? So it's pure chance.
What year was this? What year was this?
2007.
Okay, all right. So coming up to the height of everything.
It was just before the crash bit.
And was that with Harvey Nash even back then?
Yes.
And so what was it like in the first 12 months before the crash? And how did it, were you doing contract or perm, or can you jump into it?
Contracts, infrastructure, very kind of traditional PC support, desktop, laptops, end user computing, boxes, that kind of stuff. So first line, second line, third line support, server engineers, maybe some project coordination roles, fairly high volume and low margin business. And it was pretty buoyant, However, the crash, from our perspective, whilst it was obviously challenging, it did present opportunities because you had situations where organisations would let go of vast swathes of permanent staff on a Friday, but need contract staff to replace them on the Monday because of the way that budgets worked within organisations and CapEx and OpEx. And, they couldn't get through headcount approval, but they could put down contractors as being a resource under a different bracket. So that kind of on the contract market did present some opportunities. But yeah, the first 12 months was good fun. It was busy, and there was a lot of opportunity, and I worked a lot of jobs as a resourcer and picked up some of my own clients, and it was a good time.
I remember I was an IT recruiter for 4 years, and I was with Robert Walters, and I remember sitting in front of my first executive interviewing him after a few weeks in the job, and I just remember having to be completely honest with him. I'm like, look, I'm trained to do this. I don't know your industry yet. I want to help you out. Can you explain what you do in layman's terms? And I really had to kind of own up to where I was at in a professional circumstance, and it kind of worked. Was that a similar experience that you had, or how did it work for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be honest. I still do, made a point of saying to people when I don't know what they're on about. I think in this job you have to realize very quickly that credibility, transparency, honesty, they are the absolute key things if you're going to be someone that they want to work with. And also, for the most part, if you're open with people, if you show genuine interest in them, but also admit that there are gaps in your knowledge, they'll want to fill those gaps in for you.
And tell me, what do you think makes a good recruiter?
Time management. Being able to prioritize tasks. The best recruiters aren't necessarily, they're not magic salespeople with some set of skills that other people don't have. They're just able to organize their day in an effective way. They cross the T's and dot the I's. They know what's going on with their candidates. They know what's going on with their clients. They can manage the process more closely than most people because they've got more information at their disposal. And yeah, they approach it in a very sensible and structured manner.
Can you spot somebody who's going to be good at it when they don't have experience?
No. Hiring, I've always found hiring really hard, because it's such a subjective job, and it's so driven by personal motivation that it's very hard to tell in an interview situation exactly how that person's going to respond.
Is there anything you look for?
Of course, I think it's important to look for someone who's curious by nature. I think someone has to be inquisitive, and I think they have to want to kind of find out about things. And I also think that I also always try and look for someone who has had their peer group place some responsibility on them. So I tend to like it when you find people who have been presidents of a society or social secretary or treasurer, or they've been like captain of a sports team, where their own peer group have turned around and gone, yeah, you're someone that we can buy into. Because if they're that kind of character, then you would imagine that they can take some of those traits and translate that into a business environment.
Why do you think our industry is such a high turnover?
Because a lot of people get into it without really knowing what it is. It's a job that they hear about, and it's very easy to imagine it's one thing and then discover that actually the reality is quite different. People kind of come into it going, oh yeah, you can earn a lot of money really quickly, and it's going to be exciting, and it's going to be fast paced, and all of these things. And actually, when you first start, it's quite repetitive and it's boring, and you've got to do a lot of very small tasks on a very repetitive basis, and it can be a bit mind-numbing to begin with when you've got foundations in place. And I think you get a situation where you either realise that you're up for that or you're not, and it's very difficult to tell which camp you're going to fall into before you.
Hi there. How long did it take you to get good at recruitment?
I don't know. That's really hard to tell. I mean, I was able to pick up clients and do deals reasonably quickly, but I still made horrendous mistakes several years into my career. I think that you get good at recruitment as you make mistakes, and some of those mistakes can take time to make. So about 18 months into my career, I totally forgot to ask someone if they were going on holiday when they were coming onto a critical project where they needed to be immediately available and there for the next 8 weeks. And 2 weeks into that 8-week period, they were going on holiday for 2 weeks, and I hadn't asked. And after that, I never made that mistake again. I think to get good at recruitment, you need to be faced with certain circumstances, and until you are faced with them, you learn as you go. So I probably would say within kind of a year, I had most things kind of covered. I knew what I was doing, but I still think, 7 years, 8 years into my career, I'm still getting better at stuff.
I thought I knew it absolutely all after 2 years, big time. Like you couldn't have told me anything. And I know way more now, 8 years in. But I'm trying to work out what that is. And I think it's a mixture of maybe the marketing side and the candidate journeys that you can bring people on, the experience that you can bring people into from the start to the finish, and to making sure everything along that is done right. And I'm still working on that. I don't have it done perfectly. Well, at what point did you start to engage with your clients and become a brand ambassador for them, and to start doing podcasts and to become a speaker? And how did that come about?
It was quite a long path to it. When I was at university, I wrote for the student paper. I had a student radio show. I've always loved content. I'm a bit of a closet geek. I write sci-fi in my spare time. I'm a bit weird. And I've always loved writing content, anything along those lines. Harvey Nash, for the last 20 years, have produced the CIO survey. It's the world's largest CIO survey. KPMG co-sponsor it, MIT paid for some of its research. And it's brilliant, but 95% of the respondents are executive level, VP and above. We're a technology recruiter, but we didn't have anything that actually spoke about technology recruitment. So 7 years ago or so, myself and a guy called Steve Corbett, who used to work for us in Birmingham, got our heads together and said, we should do a technology survey. We've got to do something that actually speaks to our core audience, very kind of a sister survey to the CIO survey. And we got that off the ground. And in the first year, about 1,500 people replied to it. And we held an event on the back of the survey. And I did the panel moderation for that event. It was the first time that I'd done that. And I enjoyed it. And the next couple of years, I expanded the idea of the survey. We got more people to take part. The events got better. And in the meantime, I started to blog a bit more, and I realized that I could blog and I could write, and it didn't really matter if the audience was one person. So, give you an example, I went to Mobile World Congress years ago, and there was a guy there who I still talk to regularly called Mark Overton, who was at the time at Orange Business Services, heading up their machine-to-machine element and working a lot on automotive innovation. So I wrote a blog basically to post on LinkedIn, but it was very much about the automated car, and I sent it to Mark to ask him what his thoughts were before I published, and whether or not I was speaking a load of rubbish or whether or not it kind of resonated. And he came back to say, yeah, these are some of the same thoughts I've been having, fantastic, yada, yada, yada. And that accelerated that relationship. So I kind of thought content can be very targeted. It can have a very small audience, but as long as it makes an impact on that audience, that's a positive thing. The podcast was a kind of an extension of all of those thoughts. You go to events and the panels are in there, everyone agrees with each other. It's difficult to find where the fault lines are and open up interesting conversations. And equally, you want to have some targeted content that really allows you to engage with an individual. So the podcast spanned those elements and built on the fact that Harvey Nash didn't have a particularly good brand within the emerging tech space. So I kind of thought, right, Tech Talks, complete challenge a brand effectively, where we can go out and build a community and talk to technology leaders about issues that face them from a leadership point of view, and slowly over time grow a new brand and have the opportunity to engage with people. So it was that kind of a process of various different experiences slotting in over time that made me realize that there was something in that would add value.
Yeah. I think it's a great thing, and I only came across you because you sent me a link to your podcast. I listened to it. I was like, oh, great, need to get this guy on. I think I started this podcast because, if I'm perfectly honest, I find it hard to differentiate between some of the different IT recruitment agencies out there, and a lot of it comes down to the people, doesn't it? It comes down to who they are and what they're about and what they believe in, and whether you feel that they, like, if you put yourself in the shoes of like a young recruiter or somebody who's getting into the industry, you want to know that person can help you be them essentially, and not just use you as cannon fodder. And I feel like half an hour listening to somebody on a podcast gives you a much more in-depth and personal experience. Has it helped your IT recruitment business from client relationships and maybe from being able to generate some candidates?
100%. Look, I'm full-time employed by Harvey Nash. I don't make a secret of the fact that I only exist and I only have the ability to run the podcast if I offer some value back to that business, right? I'm in a very, very fortunate position where I've been in a company for a long time where they trust me to experiment with something. And that's a credit to them. But I have to be able to justify what they're paying me. I mean, it's great because the podcast itself doesn't have to be commercial. Now, the view that I've taken is I release a podcast twice a week. So minimum, I have on the show over 100 new potential clients from Harvey Nash every single year that I've met and spoken to. I don't sell Harvey Nash to them. The obvious question comes, how does the podcast pay for it? Well, I'm actually full-time employed by Harvey Nash. And that then often opens up a conversation where they go, oh, that's interesting, tell me a bit more about your background, etc., etc. And I never, ever, ever say, work with Harvey Nash. We just build that relationship. And invariably, you do that, and you concentrate on the content, you concentrate on the community, and you're credible, you are giving a platform, and you focus on those aspects, people will turn around and go, you know what, you can help us with X.
Yeah, it's a really interesting field. I enjoy it. I'm actually doing one a day now, so because there's so many people I can interview that have a different point of view. So tell me, two questions. One,
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't you ever set up your own business, given all these relationships? And two, if you were to set up your own business now, how would you structure that?
So first of all, I have no interest in doing hands-on recruitment anymore. And that's not to say that it's not a good job, because it is, but I got to the point where I'd placed 700 people or so, and I felt like I ticked that box, and I felt like I wanted to grow beyond being a recruiter, and be more of a relationship content sales director, a kind of a mash of those different areas, and see where that could take me. If I was to set up my own company, I'd have to roll my sleeves up, and quite frankly, I don't have that drive in me to do that. Okay. I think if you don't have that, then you're going to struggle, because you need that tenacity to go and make deals happen, to be successful. However, if I was to set up a business, and I've spoken to a number of different recruitment businesses over my time as well, and I know people who've here and moved on to other businesses. I think some of the most interesting firms out there now are ones that set up an outcome-based business. If you look at the way that contingent labour is changing, it isn't quite as easy to classify as permanent and contract anymore. The gig economy is certainly having an effect. And businesses are looking for outcomes to projects rather than necessarily just people. So I think some of the most interesting firms have taken people from industry and employed them to be their ambassadors, who can talk on a level with other C-level staff and put together a plan that is all outcome based. I also would very heavily focus it around thought leadership, events, and content, because I think that's the best way to engage and grow an audience that you can take on a.
Does that mean that you would be hiring a different type of profile? Like obviously you're not going to be hiring that person who can be turned into a phone-based recruiter. You'd probably need to
hire that person anymore, if I'm perfectly honest. I mean, if you're looking for the person who does the DBA, the developer, I think over the next 5 to 10 years, increasingly the model will be that is done elsewhere. Here at Harvey Nash, we have people who still obviously resource jobs from London, but increasingly they are getting higher value, lower volume style work. I think the future of the recruiter in London is the kind of the 80, 90, 100k salary style jobs. The 40k is being delivered out of our Polish office, and we have teams in Vietnam that act as a 24/7 around the clock service. I think you'd be absolutely crazy to set up a recruitment firm in London and employ a whole load of people to get on the phones and pick up jobs and fill jobs.
Yeah, interesting. You'd know it much better than me. And so you would focus it on content and thought leadership and events. Well, let's think about that now. What does that look like from a daily workflow of somebody who would join that company? And I know we're just absolutely shooting the shit here.
Yeah. I think that if you were a junior in that organization, we would want you to go out and find out the stories that potential clients want to tell, and you go out and you ask them what are the messages that you are keen to get out onto the market, because more than ever potential clients want a voice and they want a platform and they want to talk about the challenges that they're facing. So you go out and effectively create a content plan on an individual basis and ask them, would they like to be on a panel event? Would they like to come to an event? Would they like to be the audience? Would they like to have a blog post written with them? Would they like to be on a podcast? What messages do you want to get out to the market? Who do you want to connect to? You try and facilitate that and make that happen for them, because it's the kind of high value stuff that people just generally don't have the time to do. So it's kind of quasi PR work to the rest of the market. And from a recruitment point of view, people like to be able to position themselves and like to be well known. So if you can help facilitate that adds a lot of value. And then over time, you build a relationship with that individual. It would be a very genuine relationship, and they hopefully would then come back to you when they needed help with a resourcing issue.
So in simple terms, it would be creating an inbound solution in terms of both the jobs and the candidates, because you would be seen as somebody who's added value in terms of holding an event, having them on your podcast, working with them on their employer branding. So you see the future of agency recruitment as quasi HR or quasi PR marketing with traditional influencing skills when necessary.
Model that I think could work. I'm not saying it's the only model, don't get me wrong, and there'll be people out there who go, no, more of the traditional and it's more of a sales job and whatever else. I'm not saying it's not those things. I'm just saying that if I was to look at it, and obviously my personal experience plays a lot into that, and I'd look at my own strengths and how I know I can operate in the market, that would be the model that I think would suit me, and I would be able to make work over something more traditional.
Yeah, me too. But that's probably why we're both doing podcasts, right? So that's fascinating, and yeah, I agree on a lot of that too. So just one last thing: how can people find you? Where can they find your podcast? And if anybody wants to join Harvey Nash or discuss opportunities with them, what should they do?
So people can find the podcast pretty much on anything. It's on iTunes, it's on Spotify, it's on Deezer, it's on Stitcher, it's on SoundCloud, it's on Castbox, it's on BuzzFeed. It will soon hopefully be on Audible. So it's pretty much on every platform that you could wish to find a podcast. And if you type into Google Tech Talks, it comes out as the number 1 hit, despite there being a number of people who use that phrase.
Yeah, fantastic.
Indeed, if you technology podcast, it's either on the first or the second page of Google. It's popped up on either intermittently over the last few months, so it's easy to find. And in terms of joining Harvey Nash, if you're a junior recruiter potentially, or someone who's looking to move into the industry, then have I got that right?
Yeah. Just curious.
And our internal recruiter is someone called Gemma Bartlett, who's been in the industry for 11 years herself. She owned her own Rec2Rec, and we've got her as our internal recruiter, and that's Gemma Bartlett, Bartlett. Very easy to find on LinkedIn. I would suspect that the best way to kind of ask about jobs at Harvey Nash would be to find Gemma on LinkedIn and to connect to her.
All right, cool. Okay, that's everything for me. Thanks so much, David, and have a great weekend.
You too. Have a lovely weekend.
Come on.
Well, there you go. Thank you so much to David for coming on the show and dropping some knowledge on what he would do if he was to set up a recruitment company. I really like the thought of a recruitment company that offers more than just people hammering the phone and trying to sell something. I think if you involve people in the narrative rather than sell them it becomes a better experience for everybody. And David's vision of, hypothetical vision, he doesn't want to do it, of an events-based recruitment company that does your employer branding, also helps with your podcasting, does your videos, and really connects you with your community, and also runs a traditional recruitment arm on the back end. Probably not too dissimilar to what Sean is doing with Huxo Media, except I know he's not doing full-on recruitment with it, but he's doing a lot of employer branding. Anyway, thought it was an interesting insight into what you could do, especially for somebody who's been in the industry for that long and seen so much. Okay, well, we will be back on Monday with another great guest. Have a great weekend. Take care. God bless.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.